So, do you ever just wake up, go about your day, and feel like you're literally just a cog in the modern machine? Like you're constantly following someone else's rules, chasing that comfortable paycheck, and just kind of losing that primal edge that makes you, well, you? Honestly, if that sounds familiar, you are absolutely not alone. But the fix here isn't some new life hack or trending app on your phone. The ultimate playbook for breaking free was actually written way back in 1841. In this explainer, we're going to decode Ralph Waldo Emerson's legendary philosophical essay, Self-Reliance. He wrote it nearly 2 centuries ago, but I'm telling you, his words are practically a survival guide for the modern man.
Here's the playbook we'll be looking at today. First, how society wants you tame. Second, trusting your own voice. Third, the absolute power of nonconformity. Fourth, the dangerous trap of consistency. And finally, uncovering your ultimate power source. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. Society wants you tame.
Okay, take a second and read this quote. Society is a joint stock company in which the members agree, for the better securing of his bread to each shareholder, to surrender the liberty and culture of the eater. That is a mouthful, right? But let that sink in for a second. Even back in the 1800s, Emerson saw exactly what was happening to guys. He's basically comparing the society we live in to a sterile, soul-sucking corporation. What he means is, society is fundamentally designed to make you trade your individuality for comfort. You're basically offered a bargain. The world says to us, hey, just conform to our rules, wear the uniform, don't make a fuss, and we'll make sure you get your bread, right? We trade our true, authentic selves for a steady paycheck, some social approval, and a nice, predictable life. But Emerson is waving a massive red flag here. He warns that the cost of this little transaction is literally your very soul.
Emerson uses this incredibly striking physical analogy for this. He compares the civilized man who relies on things like pocket watches and carriages to a savage out in the wild wielding a club. See, the civilized man leans heavily on these crutches of technology and systems. He's got a watch, but he can't tell time by the sun anymore. He has a carriage, but he's kind of lost the use of his own legs. Meanwhile, the savage man relies entirely on his own raw strength and instinct. If he gets injured, his body heals incredibly fast because of his robust, natural vitality. Emerson's point here is that our modern over-reliance on systems, tech, and conveniences, it actually makes us weak. We become fragile and totally alienated from our own natural power.
Moving on to Section 2, trust your own voice.
Emerson really forces us to ask an incredibly uncomfortable question here. Why do we dismiss our own thoughts just because they're ours? Seriously, think about it. How often do you value the opinions of internet influencers, your boss, or just, what people say, over your own gut instincts? Emerson writes that a man will often get this brilliant flash of insight across his own mind, but then he just dismisses it without a second thought. And why? Simply because it came from him rather than from some famous expert or best-selling book. Crazy, right?
But Emerson completely redefines what it means to actually be brilliant. He says, to believe your own thought, to believe that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men, that is genius. I absolutely love that. Genius isn't about having a sky-high IQ. It's about having the absolute, unshakable guts to trust your own internal truth over the deafening noise of the crowd. And if you don't trust that voice, the consequences are honestly pretty dire. Emerson delivers this punchy, unforgettable warning. Envy is ignorance. Imitation is suicide. It's a heavy line. So the crucial takeaway for us is this. When you look at another guy's life and envy it, you're just being ignorant of your own potential. And when you try to mold yourself into another man's image, acting like him, talking like him, adopting his opinions, you are literally committing suicide on the person you are meant to be. You're just killing off your own unique character.
All right, Section 3, the power of nonconformity.
So to actually be a nonconformist, you first have to recognize the traps. Emerson lists several of these external illusions where guys falsely look for meaning and power outside of themselves. People rely on wealth and property, right? Judging themselves by what they own instead of who they actually are. Or they use traveling as this sort of fool's paradise, hoping a backpacking trip to Europe will magically fix their internal sadness, only to find that their sad self is right there waiting for them at baggage claim. Men attach themselves to these massive political parties just to feel strong in a crowd, or they blindly follow the old traditions of their parents. Make no mistake, these are all giant traps of conformity. To combat all this, Emerson lays down a pretty foundational law. He says, whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. If you want to claim true masculinity, true selfhood, and real independence, you simply cannot just go along to get along. You have to step out of that comfortable herd. You have to be totally willing to face the sour faces and the displeasure of the crowd.
Let's compare the two paths here. On the left, we've got the conformist. This guy relies on badges, job titles, and the opinions of others. He forces a fake smile at dinner parties and lives this miserable, people-pleasing existence, constantly scattering his energy just to maintain an image. But on the right, the self-reliant man. He relies purely on his intuition, his genuine actions, and his own personal integrity. Emerson says this is the kind of man who will speak the rude truth in all ways. He doesn't apologize for existing. He is a cause, a country, and an age all onto himself. That's the ultimate goal.
Which brings us to Section 4, the trap of consistency.
Emerson really jolts us awake with this visceral, honestly kind of shocking metaphor. Why drag around the corpse of your memory? He's basically asking why you allow past decisions, past statements, and old versions of yourself to hold your current self hostage. We are so terrified to disappoint people who expect us to act the exact same way we always have, aren't we?
And in response to that fear, Emerson delivers what is probably his most legendary takedown. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. Basically, if you refuse to grow, pivot, or change your stance simply because you're afraid of contradicting something you said yesterday, you are operating with a little mind. Great souls just do not care about looking perfectly consistent to the outside world.
For the modern man, you can consider this your ultimate permission slip. It is absolutely okay to contradict yourself tomorrow. Seriously, if you learn something new, if your perspective shifts, speak your new truth boldly in hard words, even if it totally contradicts everything you said today. Will you be misunderstood? Yeah, sure. But as Emerson notes, Pythagoras, Socrates, Galileo, and Jesus were all misunderstood. To be great is to be misunderstood. Real growth requires leaving your old self behind.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, your ultimate power source. Emerson calls it intuition, or spontaneity. It's the primary wisdom and deep instinctual force within you where all truth and action find their common origin. And I want to be really clear here. Emerson's version of self-reliance isn't just about being arrogant or selfish. Not at all. He believed that when you finally strip away all that fake societal conditioning we talked about, what remains at the core of your being is a profound, almost divine instinct. It's this universal intelligence that connects you directly to nature and to reality. When you act from this place, you aren't just acting for yourself. You're aligning with the very forces of nature.
So let's summarize this incredibly dense philosophy into a modern, actionable playbook. You basically have 3 steps. 1, stop imitating others. Kill the envy. 2, accept your unique circumstances. Emerson says you must take yourself for better or for worse as your portion and just till the plot of ground you've been given. And 3, act on your intuition today. Don't wait around, don't ask for permission, toss the old rules out the window, and start living entirely from that internal source of truth.
I'll leave you with this final, really provocative thought from the very end of Emerson's essay. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. You can chase the political victories, the wealth, the approval of the crowd, or the perfect travel destination all you want. But those are all just temporary bandages. External fixes will never, ever solve an internal lack of self-trust. The only way to find true peace and true power is to finally rely on the man in the mirror. So what are you going to stop conforming to today? Think about it for a second. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep trusting that inner voice.